The night shift at St. Helena always felt thinner around 2 a.m., like the whole building had exhaled and forgotten how to breathe back in. In the nurse's station, the overhead lights hummed a soft electric buzz. A muted TV in the corner cycled through late-night infomercials. Someone had left a paper cup of coffee on the counter, a skin of cold grease floating on top. Riley Hart sat at the desk, lining up vials in an empty plastic tray. Her hands moved on their own quick and neat caps. Twisting labels turned the same direction. Across the backs of her fingers, a scattering of pale scars caught the light whenever she rotated her wrist. Little white lines thin as threads, like someone had stitched a map the world had forgotten how to read. Behind her, the clock on the wall ticked past 2:46. She was checking an IV bag thumb, pressing the chamber when the trauma alarm tore through the quiet. The sound was high and metallic, shriller than the regular call bells. It cut through the humming lights, through the TV chatter, right down into the soft parts behind her ribs. Code trauma main bay. Incoming. The plastic chamber creaked under her thumb. For a second, the hospital dissolved. The sound of the alarm blended with another sound that lived at the base of her skull, a low rotary thump that always came with the smell of burning fuel and hot sand. Her vision tilted. Fluorescent panels above her blurred into a harsh white sky. She heard rotors, heard men shouting over wind, felt the dry grit on her teeth. Then someone stood up too fast beside her, bumping the counter, and the spell snapped. "Multiple GSWs," the charge nurse called out. "Everybody up, move." Riley set the IV bag down, maybe a little harder than she meant to. It bounced plastic, slapping against the tray. Her heartbeat was already adjusting to a rhythm she had not used in years, steady and sharp, every beat a decision. Her feet knew the path to Trauma 1 without thinking. Down the hall, through the swinging doors, past the crash cart, parked crooked in the corridor. The floor under her sneakers was a little sticky from some spill earlier that housekeeping had not gotten to yet. The smell of disinfectant grew stronger as she reached the bay. The doors to the ambulance bay slid open in a rush of cold air and diesel. Red and blue lights washed across the tile, the color strobing over white walls and stainless steel. "Incoming," a paramedic shouted. "No pulse en route. Get Klein." They wheeled the stretcher in at a run. The man on it looked less like a person and more like someone had taken a human shape and punched holes through it. His shirt was gone skin slick with blood that had pooled and dried in overlapping shades of rust and red. Small round wounds dotted his chest and abdomen, clusters of them, some ringed in purple, some still fresh and weeping. Riley could see at least 20 without even leaning in. Others disappeared under soaked gauze and tape. Her mind started counting, then stopped. It did not matter. "Male, late 40s, the lead medic rattled off. His voice was too loud in the room, breath fast. 40 plus small caliber entry wounds, no exit, no radial pulse since the freeway. Lost carotid 3 minutes out, bagged and ventilated, minimal response to anything." Dr. Nathan Klein pushed through the cluster of staff, tying his gown as he walked. His hair was smashed flat on one side, like he had just been pulled from a rare nap. His eyes were clear, though, taking everything in with the cold efficiency that had made him chief of trauma. He glanced once at the patient at the monitor at the medic. "Name," he asked. "Unknown, wallet is soaked, Navy ID tag on a chain, but we could not read it in the truck." Klein checked the pupils, pressed hard on the carotid. Nothing. "All right, let us at least make it look like we tried." His voice did not change, but something in his shoulders said he had already filed this man under lost. 2 large bore IVs, O negative stat, clear the airway. Page or tell them we may be sending a body. The team exploded into motion. A nurse ripped open a kit. Someone shouted for suction. The monitor chirped a flat line that might as well have been a funeral song. Riley moved to the opposite side of the gurney, hands falling into tasks she did not have to think about. She hung an IV spiked, the bag started squeezing it in. She could feel the emptiness under the man's skin, the way his veins did not push back against the catheter. Close up, she could see more details. Faint tattoos on his ribs, half hidden by blood. A few old scars that were too clean to be from accidents. A line of callus along his palms, the kind you got from weapons, not gardening. It was the smell that hit her hardest. Not just blood. Metallic, yes, sharp and wet, but under it the faint tang of cordite and burned fabric. The smell of after. Her throat tightened. For a moment, the overhead lights flickered in her mind, turning into the jittery light of a flaring fire in a dirt courtyard. The beep of the monitor slid into the crack of distant gunfire. Heart, heart. Someone was saying her name. She blinked, and the hospital snapped back into focus. Klein was looking at her from across the gurney, a frown etched between his brows. "You with us?" "Yes, doctor," she answered. He nodded toward the patient's chest. "Tube him." A resident stepped forward with the chest tube tray hands shaking just enough to rattle the instruments. The man's right side rose unevenly with each manual squeeze of the bag. Air escaped through one of the wounds with a wet hiss. We are losing what little he has in that lung, Klein muttered. Get in there, for God's sake. The resident swallowed. The scalpel hovered over skin, then drew a hesitant line. It was too shallow, too high. Blood welled, but did not do what it needed to do. Something cold in Riley snapped into place. Let me, she said. The resident stepped back without arguing. Maybe it was the way she said it. Maybe it was the way her hand closed around the scalpel, sure and economical. She felt along the ribs, counting silently, letting her fingers guide her. The skin was cold slick. The air in the room had that sharpened quality right before a storm breaks. Klein's voice cut across the bay. What do you think you are doing, Nurse Hart? She did not answer. She found the right space, pressed hard, and pushed the blade through in one clean motion. No hesitation, no wasted movement. She widened the opening with 2 fingers, then guided the tube in, angling it exactly where it needed to go. There was a brief, almost human sigh as trapped air escaped. The patient's chest shifted, the rise and fall gaining a fraction more symmetry. The monitor, flat and unforgiving until then, jumped, a blip. Then another. Hold on, one of the residents said. We have a rhythm. That cannot be right, Klein muttered. He was gone in the truck. Riley reached for a clamp, worked on a bleeder near the shoulder, tying off a vessel that was trying very hard to empty the rest of his life onto the floor. Her hands were steady. They always were when there was this much blood. They had to be. Around her the room narrowed to simple facts. Blood in, air in, holes closed, time bought. Heart, Klein snapped again. She felt his hand clamp around her wrist just as she reached for a suture. That is enough. You are out of your lane. You are not licensed for this, and I will not let you freelance. Doctor. Her voice cut through his words, quiet but harder than he expected. He held her gaze. Up close, her eyes did not look like a night nurse's eyes. They looked older than her face. You can write me up, she said, after he lives. For a heartbeat, nobody in the room moved. The only sound was the wet suction near the head of the bed and the thin electronic chirp as the monitor tried to decide if this man was staying or going. Klein looked at her, then at the patient, at the faint pulse on the screen, at the numbers inching just high enough to matter. He let go of her wrist. Fine, he said. Finish what you started. They worked in a fast, brutal rhythm after that. Riley closed what she could, stabilized what she could not. Unit after unit of blood vanished into the man's veins. The air grew thick with the heat of bodies and machines. 7 minutes later, they were pushing the gurney toward surgery. The man's chest rose under the ventilator, shallow but moving. The monitor above him sang a fragile, stubborn rhythm. In the sudden quiet of the empty trauma bay, the floor looked like someone had painted over it in broad red strokes. Gauze lay in soggy heaps. A dropped glove stuck to the tile. Riley was the last one left. She peeled off her gown and grabbed a mop from the corner. The handle was familiar in her palm, like the stock of a rifle she had not touched in years. She dipped the head into the gray water of the bucket and started to push it back and forth, erasing the outline of where the gurney had been. Voices drifted from the hall low and hurried. Did you see her? One resident whispered. That was not nursing. That was, I do not know, tactic or something. Whatever it was, I have never seen Klein shut up like that. Riley kept her gaze on the floor. The mop slid through the blood, leaving clean streaks that gleamed under the fluorescent light. The wheels of another bucket squeaked behind her. Mrs. Torres, the night custodian, rolled into the bay, her gray hair pulled back under a bandana, eyes sharper than anyone gave her credit for. You missed a spot, Torres said. Riley stepped aside. There was a lot to miss. Torres studied the half-cleaned floor, then studied Riley's hands. The damp glove clung to her skin. When she pulled it off, the scars on her fingers appeared again, lines crossing and overlapping. I knew someone like you, Torres said. She sounded like she was talking about the weather. Old base down near the Gulf. Medic. The way she moved when the choppers came in, like she had already seen it on a screen in her head. Riley wrung the glove in her fist. What happened to her? Torres dipped her mop water, sloshing softly. People started calling her a ghost. Said she saved men who had no business walking away. Then one day she was just gone. The hum of the lights filled the space between them. Riley stared at the faint pink swirl in the mop bucket. Maybe she found a quieter place, Riley said. Torres gave a small, knowing smile. Places are never quiet for people like that, she said. Hospitals, bases, does not matter. Trouble hears them breathing. Riley did not answer. She just pushed the mop across one last streak of blood and watched it vanish under the harsh, steady light. The clock on the wall read 5:03 a.m. The night was not over yet. By 6:30, the sky over Harbor Point had turned the color of dirty dishwater. Low clouds pressed down on the city, trapping the first light in a gray, tired haze. Inside St. Helena, the night shift was dissolving. New faces filtered in with fresh scrubs and fresh coffee, the overlapping of two worlds that never really met except in handover notes. Riley stood outside the ICU, a paper cup cooling between her palms. Through the glass, she could see him, the man from the trauma bay. He lay under a thin blanket, chest wrapped in dressings and tubes, a ventilator breathing for him with slow mechanical sighs. The monitor above his head printed out a fragile green line that hiccuped at uneven intervals. Someone had scraped most of the dried blood from his skin. Cleaned up, he looked less like a crime scene and more like a human being. The tattoos along his ribs were clearer now. An anchor. A trident. A line of numbers. Navy for sure. Not that she needed the ink to tell her that. Riley pressed the rim of the cup against her lower lip, but did not drink. The coffee smelled burned. Her hands still smelled faintly of latex and the iron sweetness of blood, no matter how hard she had scrubbed them. Behind her, soft footsteps approached. Dr. Klein appeared at her shoulder, white coat thrown over rumpled scrubs, a fresh tie oddly straight at his throat. In the glass, their reflections hovered over the patient like two ghosts. "You look worse than he does," Klein said. "That is not a high bar," Riley replied. He huffed something that might have been a laugh but did not quite make it. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the rise and fall of the man's chest, the machine lifting and dropping it in even strokes. "ICU says he's holding his own," Klein said, "for reasons I cannot fully explain." Riley kept her eyes on the monitor. Sometimes bodies do not listen to prognoses. Klein let that sit, then his voice shifted, aligning itself with a different purpose. "You disobeyed a direct order last night. You performed invasive procedures without authorization. On paper, that is grounds for immediate suspension." There it was, the other shoe. Riley felt the words land somewhere near her sternum. They felt familiar. Orders, grounds, suspension. Different settings, same vocabulary. "I understand," she said. "I'm not sure you do." He turned to face her fully. "Hospitals run on structure, on who is allowed to do what when. If people start freelancing in trauma, we do not just lose patients, we lose control." She finally looked at him. Up close, he had fine lines around his eyes that deepened when he squinted at imaging screens. He looked like a man who prided himself on always being the most prepared person in any room. "You think that is what last night was," Riley said. "Freelancing. What else would you call it?" She thought of the sound his voice had made when he realized the monitor was picking up a rhythm again. The surprise, the edge of relief he had not managed to hide. "Reflex QWT," she said, training. Klein's gaze sharpened. "Training from where exactly?" Her pulse gave a small private kick. She shrugged casual on the surface. "I have worked in busy ERs." He did not buy it. She could see that. He studied her face like it was a chart he had not had time to read properly. He exhaled, the fight leaking out of his shoulders. "I am required to report this, Kay," he said. "Administration has already scheduled a review. You will be kept off invasive procedures until they finish tearing apart the paperwork." Riley nodded. It was about what she expected. Then Klein added quieter, "You also saved a man who had no business making it through the night." Her fingers tightened around the cup. The coffee inside sloshed, a thin wave hitting the lid. "That part is not usually included in the report," she said. "It should be." He watched the ventilator rise and fall. "Luck does not tie off arteries like that heart. I would like to know where you learned it." "So would a lot of people," she said. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile, then he looked away. "Try to get some rest before they drag you upstairs," he said. "You look like you are about to fall over." "I have had worse nights." He seemed about to ask what that meant, then thought better of it. He left her there next to the glass alone, with the hiss of the ventilator and the soft, persistent beep of the monitor. By 8, the cafeteria smelled like every morning had ever smelled in a hospital. Burned coffee, powdered eggs, toast that had never seen butter in its life. Riley sat at a corner table with a tray she had no intention of touching. Her badge caught on the edge of her scrub top whenever she shifted. Someone had adjusted the thermostat too low. The air felt colder than it needed to. A small TV in the corner played a news segment about traffic on the bridge. No one was listening. At the table nearest the window, 2 residents picked at their food, eyes bright with the leftover adrenaline of the night. "I swear he was gone," one said around a mouthful of hash browns. "No carotid, no nothing. Then she dives in there like she's been doing chest tubes in her sleep." The other shook his head. "That clamp on the axillary bleed, I did not even see where the blood was coming from until it stopped." "Did you hear Klein try to shut her down?" "Yeah, and then he did not." They laughed under their breath, the kind of laugh that comes when you are freshly impressed and do not quite know what to do with it. At the coffee station, 2 nurses from day shift poured from the same half-empty carafe. "I heard she was an army medic," one said. "Navy, my cousin thinks," the other replied. "He said vets move different when stuff hits the fan." Riley stared at the slice of toast on her tray. It stared back pale and useless. She dug her thumbnail into the edge until it broke. A shadow fell across the table. You planning to win a staring contest with that bread? Riley looked up. Dana Wells, the charge nurse, stood there with her own tray balanced on one hip. Her dark hair was yanked into a bun that was losing the fight against gravity. She had a face that could go from gentle to steel in one breath. It is putting up a good fight, Riley said. Dana sat without asking. She took one look at Riley and sighed. You slept, 20 minutes? Maybe 30, Riley said, in a chair. Dana forked a piece of scrambled egg. They are talking about you upstairs, you know. They talk about everyone, Riley answered. Not like this. Dana lowered her voice. Admin, risk management. Klein said you went cowboy in Trauma 1. Riley's jaw tensed. Is that what he called it? His word was not cowboy, Dana admitted, but the tone was similar. That said, he also told them you kept a dead man from staying dead, which tends to buy you some goodwill. Until the lawyers arrive. Dana tilted her head, studying her. I have been doing this long enough to know the difference between reckless and precise, she said. What you did was not reckless. You were not in the room. I saw the aftermath, and I have watched you for months, Hart. You do not move like someone guessing. Riley looked back down at her tray. The coffee had filmed over a thin skin floating on top. You ever see combat footage? Dana asked out of nowhere. Riley's gaze snapped up. My brother sent some clips once, Dana said. From over there. I could not sleep for a week, so I stopped watching. But there was this one medic. The way she moved through the chaos. Same look in her eyes you had last night. Riley's throat tightened. She reached for her coffee just to have something to do with her hands. Some of us just handle emergencies well, she said. Dana did not push. She stabbed another piece of egg instead. Well, she said lightly, try not to get fired before I figure out how to work the new charting system. I'm not training another night nurse. Riley almost smiled. A crackling sound burst from the overhead speakers, followed by the calm, neutral voice of the operator. Riley Hart, please report to Conference Room C on Level 3. Riley Hart to Conference Room C. Dana arched a brow. That will be them, she said. Riley swallowed what was left of her coffee. It was as bitter as she expected. You want company? Dana asked. They will say no if you come, what do you say? Riley said. Might as well save you the walk. She pushed her tray away, stood and steadied herself for a second as her vision caught up with the motion. There was a faint ringing in her ears that had nothing to do with the speakers. On Level 3, the carpet was thicker, the walls quieter. The air smelled less like antiseptic and more like recycled meetings. Conference Room C sat at the end of the hallway door, closed blinds drawn. A folder sat on a side table outside, forgotten or left as a signal. Her name was printed on a paper clipped to the front. Riley did not pick it up. She knocked once and opened the door. 2 people looked up from the table. The man was in his 40s, maybe suit cut neat, but not flashy tie, loosened just enough to suggest he had not come from a desk. His hair was peppered at the temples, his eyes a steady assessing gray. The woman beside him was younger, mid-30s, in a dark blazer and slacks tablet, in front of her stylus, resting against her thumb. Her hair was pulled back in a simple knot. Her gaze moved fast, taking Riley in like she was scanning a file. Ms. Hart, the man said, standing. Thanks for coming up. Please sit. She stayed by the door for a heartbeat, taking in the details. No hospital badges, different laminate on their IDs. She recognized the government seal before she let herself admit it. Am I in trouble? She asked. Or just very interesting today? The corners of the man's mouth twitched. Depends who you ask, he said. I am Marcus Hale. This is Agent Lena Cho. We are with the Department of Defense. The words landed like a weight in the room. For a second, the hum of the air vent was the only sound. Department of Defense, Riley repeated. Hale gestured to the chair across from him. We have a few questions about the events in your trauma bay last night and about your background. Riley sat. The chair was softer than anything downstairs. Cho slid a thin file across the table. The paper inside was older, the ink slightly faded. A photograph lay on top. Riley did not need to flip it over to know what it was. She recognized the edges, the thickness, the way military printers left a particular grain in the gloss. Still, her hand moved almost against her will, turning it so it faced her. A younger version of herself stared back from the page. Hair cut short under a navy cap. Uniform crisp, shoulder square. The name tape above her pocket read, Hart R. Her rank insignia sat on her collar, sharp as a blade. Under that, in block letters, were the words, L.T. Riley Hart, Naval Special Warfare Medical Support. For a moment, she forgot to breathe. The room narrowed to the glossy rectangle in front of her. The younger woman in the photograph held herself like she had been carved from something harder than bone. The uniform fit as if it belonged. The eyes were what caught her, clear, direct, no shadows yet. Riley set the picture back down, face down on the folder. So, she said, Her voice came out even, which surprised her. You went digging. Hale watched her elbows resting on the table, hands folded. Cho sat almost perfectly still, only her eyes moving. We pulled your federal records, Hale said. Or what is left of them. Most of the files are redacted. Some are missing entirely. That happens, Riley replied. He tapped the folder lightly. You were not always Nurse Hart at St. Helena. Riley looked at the blank tabletop beside the file. I was young, she said. People do strange things in their 20s. Your strange thing, whoa, Hale said, was serving as a lieutenant in naval special warfare, combat medical support, multiple deployments, attached to units that technically did not exist. Cho slid another sheet forward. It was a grainy satellite photo printed in black and white. A cluster of low buildings sat in the middle of a pale expanse. One corner had been blurred by what looked like smoke frozen in mid-blue. Under it, small letters read, Target location, Glass Dune Classified Operations Theater. Riley did not touch that paper at all. I'm guessing you did not drag me up here to give me a service pin, she said. Hale glanced at Cho, then back at her. Operation Glass Dune, he said. You were listed as killed in action, along with 8 operators and a Navy commander. Riley kept her face still, but inside, the old desert heat rolled under her skin. She heard rotors again, the crack of something heavy hitting metal, a man shouting her name through dust. That is a long time ago, she said. It is on the record, Hale replied. What is not on the record is the part where you are sitting here now, alive, working under a different resume in a civilian hospital. Paperwork error, she said, happens more than you think. Cho spoke for the first time, her voice calm. Your social security number was reassigned, Vito, she said. Your discharge papers are incomplete. Your medical file ends in a field note from a forward operating base. Then nothing. For 15 years. Riley felt the edges of the chair under her hands. Hard plastic, not a stretcher, not sand. You went looking in some very dusty closets, she said. It raised some flags, Hale admitted. The department does not usually lose track of lieutenants from units like yours. He leaned in a fraction. I am trying to decide if you have been hiding or if someone has been hiding you. Riley let herself exhale slowly. Can I ask a question, she said. Of course. Does any of this have to do with the man in ICU 3? Hale did not answer right away. He reached into the folder and pulled out one more photo. This one was clearer, newer. It showed a man in dress whites, jaw square, smile too thin to be fully relaxed. The same tattoos peeked from under the cuffs. Commander Cole Maddox, Hale said. Former team leader, Navy Special Warfare Development Group. Cho added, also listed killed in action during Operation Glass Dune. Riley stared at the photo, then at the mental image of the man under ventilator tubing downstairs. The line of his mouth was the same, even slack. The shape of the nose. The scar by his left eyebrow. You are saying he is supposed to be dead, she said. So are you, Hesiolobis. Il is tres dwarfs. Hale replied. Silence settled over the table, thick as gauze. Riley knew how to control her breathing. She shortened the inhale, lengthened the exhale the way they had taught her in a hot tent, with flies buzzing around open wounds. Her voice when it came was flat. What happened to Glass Dune in your version, she asked. A high-risk extraction operation in a hostile zone, Hale said. Force compromised. Air support delayed. Full team lost before reinforcement could arrive. Final report signed by Colonel Victor Harlan. You ring any bells there? Harlan. The name tasted like sand in the back of her throat. We were told we were going in for prisoners, she said slowly. High-value targets. People on lists that never make the news. We landed. There were no prisoners. Just computers, racks, cables. Equipment built to hide transactions and contracts the wrong people wanted hidden. You were sent to scrub data, Cho said. We were sent to make sure no proof existed that certain deals had ever been made, Riley replied. People included. Images slid up from where she had locked them. Fire crawling along the edge of a barrel. Josh Keegan, his face streaked with sweat and dust, shoving a pack into her hands. Go Hart, get Maddox out, I will hold the line. The sound of incoming rounds had turned everything into stuttering snapshots. Walls blown open, a doorway that had been there 1 second and was gone the next. The feeling of someone behind her, then not. She blinked and the conference room ceiling swam into focus again. Hale watched her carefully. Why did you not come home under your own name, he asked. Riley thought of the debrief tent that smelled of bleach and stale air, of a hand, slapping papers on a table, of a voice, telling her that unit. That mission, those people would not exist in any form that the public could touch. Somebody decided it would be cleaner if I did not, she said. Who? Hale asked. She looked at him, then at Cho, then at the folder that held the ghost of her younger self. You have his signature in your file, she said. Colonel Harlan, he signed the report, you tell me. Hale did not respond to that directly. Instead, he closed the folder, palms resting on the cover. Last night, he said, a man with 40-plus bullet wounds and no pulse was brought into your trauma bay. You led a series of interventions that should have been outside your scope of practice. According to staff, you moved with the confidence of someone who had done those procedures in combat conditions. Riley sat very still. This morning, he continued, that man is alive. His dog tags identify him as Cole Maddox, the same officer listed as killed beside you in Colonel Harlan's report. Cho shifted her tablet, bringing up a screen Riley could not see. You can understand, Cho said, why some people are very interested in how two ghosts from the same file ended up under the same roof in Harbor Point. Riley felt a tightness in her chest that had nothing to do with panic. It was something colder, something like recognition. Coincidence, she said. Hale did not smile. I have worked in this job long enough, Oput, he said, to know coincidence rarely shows up with this much paperwork attached. There was a knock at the door. A nurse stuck her head in hairnet, still on eyes a little wide. Sorry, she said, looking between them. They asked me to tell you. The patient from Trauma 1. The one from last night. He is starting to come around. Riley's chair scraped softly as she stood. I need to be there, she said. Hale hesitated, then rose as well. Fine, he said. We can continue this downstairs. The ICU felt even colder than before. The air was dry, the sort that makes skin itch after a few hours. Machines lined the walls, each humming its own thin song. Cole Maddox lay where he had been, but his face had changed. There was color in it now, faint but present. His lashes fluttered against bruised skin. Riley stepped to the side of the bed. She could feel Hale and Cho behind her, just outside the glass. The nurse from earlier checked the lines, then moved aside. The beeping of the monitor picked up a little faster, as if the heart inside that battered chest was deciding to rejoin the room. His fingers twitched. Commander, the nurse said softly, if you can hear me, you are in a hospital. You are safe. His brow furrowed, his lips parted. The first sound that came out was a rough exhale like air from a punctured lung, then more clearly, medic. Riley's hand closed around the rail of the bed. His eyes opened a crack, unfocused at first, then searching. They landed on her face above the mask. Hard, he rasped. The words scraped across his throat. Thought you left me in the sand. Riley swallowed. The room seemed to tilt, ICU lights bleaching into desert sun. I got you out, she said quietly. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. Guess we both missed the memo, he whispered. We were not supposed to walk away. The monitor kept beeping steady and insistent, as if agreeing. Behind the glass, Hale watched them with a look Riley could not quite read. Two names that should have been carved on a memorial wall were suddenly very alive in a room that smelled of disinfectant and second chances. By afternoon, St. Helena looked as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. The floor shone, the trash bins had been emptied. The only hint of the night before was a faint chemical tang where the trauma bay had been scrubbed too hard. The story had already grown legs. In the hallways, people stepped aside when Riley walked past. Some of them nodded half respectful, half unsure. Others stared a beat too long, like she was a headline walking around in scrubs. In the staff lounge, someone had left the local news on with the sound off. A text bar crawled along the bottom of the screen. Unidentified Navy officer survives massive shooting. Sources treated at Harbor Point Hospital. No one had called it St. Helena yet. That would change. Riley stood at the sink, rinsing out a mug that was not hers. The water ran hot over her fingers. The skin had gone red from washing and re-washing. The scars on her knuckles stood out like pale riverbeds. Behind her, Dana pushed the door open with a hip and flopped into a chair. They are setting up a podium in the lobby, Dana said, which is never a good sign. Press conference, Riley said. Administration smells publicity. A miracle Navy man and the quiet nurse who saved him. They love it. They are probably arguing over who gets to say the word heroic the most. Riley set the mug upside down on the rack. I am not giving a statement, she said. Too late. They already asked for you. PR sent an email. Something about humanizing the story and showcasing St. Helena's excellence. Riley dried her hands on a paper towel. They can humanize someone else. Dana watched her a moment. You all right? She asked. Riley considered the question. Sleep had come in brief, jagged slips. Whenever she closed her eyes for longer than a blink, she saw fire on sand in the shape of Cole's face half buried in dust. I have been worse, she said. That is not the same thing. The overhead intercom clicked and the operator's voice floated through. Riley Hart, please report to administration on level 2. Riley Hart to administration. Dana winced. They are not letting go, she said. Riley shook her head. They can wait. She turned away from the sink and headed instead toward the east wing. Her badge opened the door to the ICU without protest. In Cole's room, the lights were dimmed to a soft blue. The blinds were drawn, muting the glare from outside. He lay with the head of the bed slightly elevated, now ventilator gone. An oxygen cannula rested under his nose. The tube taped to his hand led to a machine that whirred with quiet authority. He looked less like a ghost and more like someone halfway between here and somewhere else. His eyes opened when she stepped in. They were clearer than earlier, though still heavy with drugs. "You again," he said. His voice was rough but stronger. Riley moved to the bedside, checking the monitors out of habit. "ICU is short-staffed," he says. "Ich bin nicht scared." He tried to smile. It pulled at the bruise along his cheek. Still funny, Hart. She had not heard her name said that way in years. It sounded like it belonged to someone slightly taller, slightly louder, someone who had not yet learned to move softly through civilian corridors. He followed her gaze to the monitors. "How bad?" he asked. "You have more holes than a practice target," she said. "But you are here." "Did not feel like that on the freeway." He closed his eyes briefly as if replaying something in his head. "Last thing I remember is headlights, then cold, then your voice yelling at someone to move." "You were busy leaking," she said. He opened his eyes again, studying her. "You look different out of uniform," he said. "So do you," she replied. For a moment, the air between them was full of things neither of them said. The last time she had seen him awake, the sky had been the color of ash. His shoulder had been slick with blood. He had pushed her toward a smoking helicopter and shouted at her to go. "You saved me twice," he said. "Once in the sand, once on a tile floor. You got bad habits, Hart." "Occupational hazard," she said. Before he could answer, someone cleared a throat at the door. Agent Hale stood there, a clipboard in hand, to make him look more like he belonged. Lena Cho hovered just behind him, her badge clipped inside her blazer. "We need a moment," Hale said gently. Riley stepped back, letting them in. Cole's eyes sharpened when he saw their IDs. "Great," he muttered. "The cavalry." Hale gave him a nod. "Commander Maddox, I am Marcus Hale, Department of Defense. This is Agent Cho. We have some questions, but we can keep it short." "Short is good," Cole said. "Long makes my head hurt." Hale hesitated, then looked at Riley. "You can stay, Vi," he said, "if the commander agrees." Cole turned his head slightly toward her. "If she leaves, I'm not talking," he said. Riley felt a small pull in her chest she did not have time to name. Hale moved to the foot of the bed, glancing at the vital signs as if they were part of the interview. "You were listed as killed in action during the Operation Glass Dune," Hale said. "Do you remember that designation?" Cole's eyes grew distant for a second, then focused again. "I remember a lot of sand and a lot of bad calls," he said. "The name is just what someone typed on paperwork." "In that paperwork," Hale went on, "you and Lieutenant Hart died together." Cole shifted his gaze to Riley, then back to Hale. "Looks like someone flunked math," he said. "We are trying to understand why a supposedly dead commander from a sealed operation was found on a freeway in California full of bullets," Cho said, "and why the medic listed as killed beside him is the one who brought him back." Cole watched her for a beat. "You got clearance for that answer?" he asked. "We can get it," Hale said. Cole looked at Faye. "You okay?" Cole looked at Riley. "Same people sign his paycheck?" he asked quietly. "The same stamp," Riley said. "Different hands." Cole let out a slow breath. "The war did not stop for everyone when they closed our file," he said. "Some of us kept working. There were jobs that needed doing where it was convenient to have ghosts on the roster." Hale frowned slightly. "Unofficial operations?" "Unofficial would have been polite," Cole said. "These were invisible, no flags, no names, just outcomes." "Who was running them?" Cho asked. Cole's gaze dropped to his own hands, the tape on his fingers, the fine tremor that came when he tried to flex. "Same man who signed us off as dead," he said. "Colonel Harlan, he figured if no one could prove we existed, no one could ask what he was using us for." The room hummed, machines ticked and clicked softly. Hale opened his mouth, but the overhead alarm cut across his words. This one was different from the trauma call. Shorter bursts, sharper. It vibrated in the metal of the bed rails. "Attention," the intercom voice said. "Code Gray, security incident. All staff remain in your areas until further notice." Riley felt the hair on her arms rise. Code Gray at St. Helena usually meant a combative patient, a family fight. This did not sound like that. In the hallway, footsteps picked up speed. A unit secretary hurried past the ICU doors, her eyes wide. Hale glanced at Cho. "That is not us," he said. Cho already had her phone out, checking for messages. Her brows drew together. "Internal channels just went dark," she said. "No access to security feed." Cole tried to shift, winced. "What is going on?" he asked. Riley moved to the window and peered through the narrow view toward the elevator bay. A guard was speaking into his radio, but his earpiece cord hung loose. He shook the device, frustrated. Her pulse thudded in her ears, syncing with the alarm. "Someone is jamming your comms, Shuaolai. Keep go on, she said. Hale turned. You cannot know that from one announcement. I can hear it, she said. The way the radios are cutting, the pattern on the alarm, they locked the floor without warning. Cho stepped closer to the window. You think this is connected? She asked. Riley looked at Cole pale against the pillow IV line snaking to the pump. Then at the door to the unit, the only barrier between them and whatever moved in the hall. They do not scrub an operation like Glass Dune halfway, Fika, she said. If Harlan knows we are breathing, he will not leave it to a memo. As if on cue, the overhead lights flickered, just once, enough to make everyone look up. The ICU nurse at the central station picked up the phone, then put it down again when she realized there was no dial tone. Somewhere on the floor below, something hit metal with a deep, hollow sound. Riley's hands had already curled into fists, scar lines whitening. The hospital smell of bleach and antiseptic thinned in her mind, replaced by the dust and diesel of a different place. She let out a breath and forced herself to focus. Agent Hale, she said, you need to get your people to lock down access points and move anybody not critical away from this wing. We do not know what this is yet, he replied. You will not like finding out the slow way, she said. His jaw flexed. He did not like being told how to run his scene. Another alarm joined the first, a lower tone rolling along the ceiling panels. Code Silver, the intercom said. Security to sub-level access, possible weapon on site. Hale swore under his breath. That is us, he said. He moved to the door. Cho, stay here with them. Hart, do not go anywhere. Riley did not answer. She watched him disappear into the hall, then turned back to Cole. He was looking at her with the same expression he had worn when they had been pinned behind a broken wall 12 years ago, bullets chewing through plaster above their heads. Tell me I am wrong, he said. She could not. The floor under her feet felt less like polished tile and more like the packed earth of a forward operating post. The beep of the monitor steadied each tiny sound, counting off a measure of borrowed time. The beeping in Cole's room had become a kind of drum in Riley's chest. Each tone a count, each count a choice. Cho stepped closer to the glass phone still in her hand. I am not getting anything from internal security, she said. No camera feeds, no door logs. Riley studied the hallway. The guard from earlier was gone. The elevator indicator over the doors blinked between floors without pattern, then froze. How many entrances are there to this floor? Riley asked. 2 main, Cho said. Elevators and central stair. Service stair at the far end. Why? Riley checked the oxygen line running to Cole the IV pole the monitor leads. Her movements were quick but gentle. Because if I were coming for someone in intensive care, she said, I would split the team. 1 to draw security, 1 to come quiet from the back. Cole watched her eyes alert now. You think this is about me, he said. Riley met his gaze. I think men who shoot you that many times do not like loose ends, she said. Out in the corridor, the Code Silver alarm cut off abruptly. The sudden silence was worse than the noise. Cho flinched. That is not a good sign, she said. The ICU door slid open with a soft hiss. A security officer walked in hand near his holster, but not on it, his expression sharp. We are moving patients away from the East Wing, he said to the nurse at the station. Administration wants everybody non-critical toward Central. Lock doors limit access. The nurse nodded, already standing. Riley stepped out into the middle of the unit. What about him? She asked, jerking her head toward Cole's room. The officer glanced at the chart on the wall. ICU 3 stays put, he said. Too many lines, too unstable to move until we know more. Riley thought of corridors of choke points. What is happening downstairs? She asked. The officer shrugged. They did not tell us, just said Code Silver and to hold position. Cho held up her badge. Agent Lena Cho, Department of Defense, she said. Who is running your security response? House Supervisor is coordinating, he said. But the radios are not cooperating. Which means no one is coordinating, Riley said. The officer bristled. Ma'am, we have procedures. So did the last place that got hit like this, Riley replied. She took a breath. The walls felt closer than they had 5 minutes ago. The air vents hummed too loudly. Is there a back way out of this unit? She asked the nurse. The nurse hesitated, then nodded toward a door near the medication room. Service corridor, she said, leads to the old step-down wing, hardly used. Riley filed it away. Hale told you to stay put, Cho said to Riley. Hale is chasing the loud thing, Riley said. If this is what I think it is, the real problem will not be loud until it is too late. Cole shifted against his pillows. You still do not listen very well, he said. I pick my moments, she answered. There was a dull thud from somewhere below, strong enough to tremble through the floor. One of the monitors at the central station flickered, then went black. The security officer's hand finally went to his radio. Central report, he said. Central, this is ICU North. What just blew? Static hissed back at him. A faint chopped voice tried to break through, then vanished. Riley looked at the ceiling. She could almost see the layout through it. Sublevel, service tunnel, stairwells. They are cutting power to systems in sections, she said, trying to blind you bit by bit. The officer stared at her. How do you know that? He asked. Because that is what we did to enemy hospitals that had comms hooked into local networks, she said. You pull the eyes first. Cho spoke quietly. If this is Harlan, she said, he knows you and Maddox are here. He knows the files above you are fragile. It fits. The officer's face paled. Colonel Harlan, he repeated. That name keeps coming up with the suits. Riley moved back into Cole's room. I'm getting you out of this pod, Shushuani said. The doctor just said I stay put, Cole replied. I have been the doctor, she said. You are moving. She disconnected the non-essential monitors, leaving the heart line and oxygen. She checked the IV pump, noted the rate, and unplugged the machine from the wall, switching it to battery. Hart, Cho said at the doorway, you cannot just wheel him out. I can and I will, Riley answered. You can either help clear the way or stand in it. She unlocked the bed brakes and tilted the head a notch higher so Cole would not choke if he coughed. You yell if your chest feels wrong or the room spins, she told him. It already spins, he said. You just keep the holes plugged. She pushed the bed toward the service door. The security officer stepped ahead to open it. The hinges creaked softly, unused. The corridor beyond was narrower, lit by harsh strips along the ceiling. It smelled of old paint and dust. For a moment, Riley could pretend she was back in a bunker passage, the air thick with recycled air and the weight of concrete above. They moved quickly as a rolling hospital bed allowed. Cho checked each corner before they reached it, hand near the small of her back, where her concealed weapon sat. They were halfway down when the next explosion hit. This one was closer. The floor jumped under them. A sharp crack echoed up through the vent shafts, followed by the pop and rattle of smaller impacts. The lights flickered again, then steadied. An alarm started blaring somewhere behind them, wailing in uneven pitches. Cole sucked in a breath as the bed jolted. You all right? Riley asked. Feels like a Tuesday, he said through clenched teeth. Where did that come from? Cho asked the officer. Sublevel loading, Sahib Kagad? His voice had taken on a new tightness. That is under the east wing. Riley pushed harder. The main stairwell will be compromised, she said. We go down through service and out into the garage. If they came in heavy from below, they will expect us to run away from that, not toward it. That is insane, the officer said. It is also the only way we do not walk into the barrel of a gun at the central elevators, Riley replied. They reached the stair door. The officer pulled it open cautiously. The narrow concrete well beyond was empty. The air smelled faintly of smoke. Riley angled the bed around, lining its nose with the top step. This is a bad idea, Cole said. It will be worse if we stay put, Riley said. She locked the bed, dropped the side rail, and braced. On 3, she told the officer and Cho, we tilt and slide it one step at a time. Try not to bang the patient into the wall. He complains. Cole muttered something under his breath that might have been a joke if his teeth were not clenched so hard. They eased the bed down. Each step was a small controlled drop metal skidding against concrete. Cole sucked air through his nose, eyes squeezed shut. By the time they reached the landing on the next floor, sweat had gathered along Riley's spine. At the last flight before the garage level, voices filtered up from below. Watch your angles. Check the corners. Do not leave your backs to the open. The cadence was wrong for hospital security. Too calm. Too drilled. Riley stopped. Cho edged forward, peered over the railing. She pulled back quickly. 4, maybe 5, she whispered. Tactical gear, not our uniforms, weapons up. The officer's hand went automatically to his empty holster. He had not been issued anything more serious than a sidearm, and that felt like a toy compared to rifles. They are heading for the main corridor to ICU, Cho said, moving quiet like they have plans. Riley's mind mapped their path. Those men would take the more direct route through Central. Staff would be in their way. Patients. Harlan's people would not care. We are below them, she said. We slip under and out. She pushed the bed off the landing and down the last set of stairs to the sublevel door. Her arms burned, but she did not slow. The door to the garage opened onto a long strip of concrete and dim fluorescence. Rows of cars sat in neat lines, their surfaces reflecting the emergency lights flashing faintly from the entrance ramp. For 1 second, it seemed empty. Then an SUV rolled into view from behind a concrete pillar. Its engine idled low. The headlights cut through the dust in the air. The vehicle stopped a few yards away. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, adjusting the collar of a damp field jacket. He wore no insignia, but his posture carried authority like another layer of clothing. His hair had gone more gray than the last time Riley had seen it. The set of his mouth had not changed. Lieutenant Hart, he said. His voice carried easily in the echoing space. Or is it Ms. Hart now? Victor Harlan. Riley's fingers tightened on the bed rail. Harlan, she said. The security officer lifted his radio again as if habit might suddenly make it work. Cho's hand moved toward her weapon. The colonel lifted one hand in a lazy half gesture. "I would not," he said. "At least not if you like going home tonight." More figures appeared around the SUV, fanning out, all in black tactical clothing. Their rifles were steady, not wavering even a fraction. Harlan's gaze slid to the bed. "Commander Maddox," he yelled, he said. "You look terrible." Cole glared up at him. "You look older," he rasped. "Time does that," Harlan said. "Some of us are not as lucky as others to stay frozen in a file." Riley stepped instinctively between Harlan and the bed, placing herself so any shot would have to go through her. "Facility is under federal investigation," Cho said from behind her. Her voice was level. "You have no jurisdiction here." Harlan looked at her for the first time. "Agent Cho," he said, "I admire your optimism. You think lines on paper matter in rooms like this." "You brought armed men into a civilian hospital," Cho replied. "Whatever you think you are cleaning up, this is not the way." "I am preventing a mess," Harlan said. "There is a difference." He met Riley's eyes again. "You both were supposed to be dead," he said. "That was the agreement. Your mission ends in the sand. Names on a wall, nothing more. Clean, contained." "People are not paperwork," Riley said. "In my experience, they are exactly that," Harlan replied. "Numbers, losses, assets. I gave you a good end, Hart. Flag, folded triangle. Somebody cried. You were free." "Free," she repeated. "You chose to walk back into my line of sight when you put your hands on Maddox last night," he said. "You could have let him go. Instead, you dragged him back and lit up every alarm you did not know still had your name on it." "You put him in the ground before," Cole said. "Or tried." Harlan shrugged. "You were a loose gun," he said. "And you knew too much about operations that would never survive sunlight. Nothing personal." "It was to the people bleeding," Riley said. He studied her a moment, taking in the scrubs, the badge, the hospital shoes. "You traded a rifle for a stethoscope," he said. "Interesting choice." "I am still stopping people from dying," she answered. He smiled thinly. "You are clinging to a man who should not exist," he said. "Both of you. You are evidence, and evidence is dangerous." A new sound cut across the garage. Sirens, louder now closer. From above, red and blue lights strobed against the low ceiling as more vehicles reached the hospital perimeter. Harlan tilted his head, listening. "Your new friends work fast, I thought," he said. "That's clement. The egg is unfortunate." He took a step back toward his SUV. "You can come with me," he said to Riley. "You and the commander. There are ways to tidy this that do not end with your bodies on a slab." Riley did not move. "We are not yours to tidy," she said. Harlan's expression cooled. "Then you are simply in the way," he said. For a heartbeat, the garage held its breath. The rifles around him adjusted by degrees. Then a shout rang from the far entrance. "Federal agents, drop your weapons." Hale's voice, firm, carried by a megaphone. Footsteps pounded down the ramp. More armed figures in tactical vests appeared, their badges bright against dark gear. Harlan's men shifted, calculating lines of fire that suddenly had more directions than they had bullets. Harlan took in the new arrivals, then looked back at Riley one last time. This is not finished," he said. He signaled with 2 fingers. His men began to pull back in a smooth, practiced motion, keeping their weapons trained as they retreated. The SUV door slammed. Tires squealed against the concrete. In another moment, they were gone, swallowed by the spiral of the exit ramp. The echoes of their engines faded under the rising noise of sirens. Riley realized her hands were shaking on the bed rail. She forced her grip to loosen. Cole exhaled slowly, a shudder running through him. Hale reached them a second later, vest half-fastened, hair damp with sweat. "Hart," he said, looking from her to Cole to Cho. "You all right?" "Define all right." "All right," Riley said. He scanned the garage, jaw tight. "That was Harlan," he said. "It was not a question." "With friends," Cho replied. Hale cursed under his breath. "Security is clearing the floors," he said. "We are locking this building down tight. No one gets in or out without us knowing." Riley looked at the ramp where the SUV had vanished. "He already walked in," she said. "He knows the layout. He knows we are alive. That bell does not unring." Cole closed his eyes briefly. "At least we know who we are playing against," he said. Riley felt the weight of Harlan's last look still pressing on her skin. The air in the garage tasted of exhaust and the faint copper of fear. The alarms inside the hospital shifted tones again, settling into a new pattern. Not panic, not yet, but something close. The sirens thinned out by evening. The last of the marked cars pulled away from St. Helena, their lights fading into the low clouds over Harbor Point. The hospital settled into a strange, hushed version of its usual rhythm, like a heart finding a new pace after a shock. Riley sat on the back bumper of an idle ambulance near the loading bay. The metal was cold through her scrub pants. Her hands rested on her knees, fingers slightly apart, the pale lines of her scars catching the parking lot lights. Inside, people were still giving statements. Security guards, nurses, the charge for the East Wing. Somewhere, an administrator was already rehearsing a careful explanation that used words like isolated incident and handled swiftly. Riley stared at a crack in the asphalt, following the way it branched in two directions, before disappearing under the wheel of a parked car. Footsteps crunched on gravel behind her. "You look like someone stole your last hour of sleep," Hale said. She did not turn immediately. "That happened years ago," she said. He came to stand beside the ambulance, hands in the pockets of his coat. His vest was gone. His tie was back on, although the knot was crooked. "Cole is stable, Thai," he said. "Cho is babysitting him. Hospital security is installing 3 new locks on every door they can find." "Locks will not stop someone who already knows the codes," Riley said. "They will make administration feel better," Hale replied. "That counts for something." They watched a paramedic coil a hose near the wall, the water dripping in slow beaded lines. "You handled yourself down there," Hale said after a moment. "In the stairwell, in the garage." "I pushed a bed and tried not to drop my patient," she said. "You also anticipated Harlan's moves before I could get a team in place." She let out a breath. "You came in from the top," she said. "He came in from underneath. You are trained to respond to threats inside the frame. He is trained to redraw the frame." "Heart." She finally looked at him. "I need to ask you something," he said. "Ask." He studied her as if trying to decide which words would set something off. "We are putting together a case," he said. "Not just on Harlan, on Glass Dune, on what came after. We will not get another shot at this with you and Maddox both above ground." "This sounds like recruiting," she said. "It is an invitation, reportage," he replied. "You talk, under oath, on record. You tell us what you saw. We turn ghosts into something that counts in a courtroom." Riley watched a breath leave her mouth in a thin white stream. "I already told someone," she said, "a long time ago." "And they buried it," Hale said. "We can pull it back up." She looked past him toward the city. Harbor Point's skyline was a row of uneven teeth against the clouds. Somewhere out there, Harlan was adjusting his plans. "You think a jury will believe missions that did not happen?" she asked. "Units that do not exist." "They believed a man could take 40 bullets and live," Hale said softly. "People notice more than you think." Riley rubbed her thumb along one of the raised lines on her knuckle. "Keegan died at Glass Dune," she said. "I dragged Maddox out and left him in a med tent with a promise that never reached his ears. I sat in front of an officer with clean boots and told him everything that burned. He wrote it down and stamped it into silence." Hale stood very still. "What makes you think this will be different?" she asked. He did not answer with words at first. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket and held it out. "Because this time," he said, "the request came from above my pay grade. Somebody up the line decided Harlan stopped being an asset." She did not take the paper. "You could disappear again," he went on. "Different town, different name, night shifts somewhere else. Or you could stay exactly who you are and make them listen with the same stubbornness you had in that trauma bay." She smiled a small, tired movement. "I need a real resume for that," she said. "We can help with that too," he said. "The boring kind, degrees, certifications, no redacted lines." She let that sit between them, the sky darkened by degrees. At last she slid off the bumper. "I will talk," she said, "in your rooms, in your halls, on your recorders." Relief crossed his face, quick and unhidden. "But," she added, "I am not waiting on committees while people bleed." Hale nodded. "I did not figure you for waiting," he said. Weeks turned into a measure of headlines and hearings. The shooting at St. Helena became a story, then part of another story folded into talk of oversight and shadow budgets. Somewhere on a small channel, a scroll of text mentioned Colonel Victor Harlan as the subject of an internal review. The words retired and allegations shared the same sentence. Riley sat in rooms with no windows and spoke into microphones. She described sand and fire names and dates. Lawyers asked her to be precise. She was. When she was not talking, she worked. Not always at St. Helena. Sometimes in places where the walls were canvas and the floors were dirt. In a flood zone upriver, she taped a flashlight to a broken IV pole and threaded a cannula into a child's hand while rain hammered the roof of a makeshift clinic. The generator cut for 30 seconds. In the dark, the only sound was the steady beep of a portable monitor. On the edge of a wildfire line, she flushed ash from a firefighter's eyes and listened to his heartbeat thudding fast against her stethoscope. The air tasted of smoke and char. Sirens wailed somewhere beyond the trees. In a crowded gym-turned-shelter after an apartment building collapse, she wrapped an old woman's ankle and adjusted the oxygen tank at her side. The woman gripped her wrist and called her Angel. Riley shook her head and checked the regulator valve instead. Wherever she went, her hands moved the same way, quick, precise, calm in the middle of other people's storms. Once in a grainy news clip from one of those places Dana thought she saw her. A figure in scrubs with a familiar posture bending over a stretcher as a helicopter kicked up dust in the background. By the time she focused, the camera had panned away. At St. Helena, the trauma bay floors kept shining. New staff came in. Old ones moved on. The story of the night the ghost nurse saved a dead man turned into something people mentioned to new hires during slow shifts, half legend, half warning. In the quiet hours when the alarm system was only a low hum in the walls, the monitors still beeped in their patient, insistent rhythm. Somewhere Riley listened for that sound, and wherever she heard it, she walked toward it. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.